So my dad is a retired librarian, and he spent more than 30 years working in libraries in various colleges and universities, and he loved his job. He loved helping people dig up information about passionate issues they had, doing research or learning more about the world around them. And during his career, he certainly processed quite a few overdue books. Um, but when he was younger, he never thought he would have been a librarian ever. My grandmother used to say my father was a lost soul when he was young. He had no clear path in his life. He didn't know what he wanted to do. He was just kind of a wanderer. And so when my dad went to college, he went to a rather expensive private college, and he got a degree in Spanish and math. But once he graduated, again, he had no idea what to do with himself. So one day when he was walking around his hometown, he saw a recruiting station for the Army. And he walks in and he says, I want to join the Army. I want to enlist. And the recruiter looked at him and was like, okay, you can sign up for 3 years, for 5 years, or for 7 years. And my dad said, nah, give me 7. I'll take the big one. And thank God the recruiter had a heart and knew my father was a lost soul and said, let's start with 3 and you can see how that goes. And sure enough, once my dad joined the Army, he quickly realized the military life was not meant for him. And after 2 years, he was desperately looking for any way to get out. And he found out there was a program in the Army where if you enrolled in graduate school for a very specific degree, you could get out of the military early, 11 months early. And that specific degree was library sciences. My father at the time had never heard of library sciences, didn't know anything about it, but he said, if it gets me out of the Army, sign me up. And that was the beginning of his career as a librarian. And it worked out really well for him. He ultimately became the head of all the math and science libraries at the University of Maryland. So one day when he was working, he was walking past the checkout desk where people would return and check out their books, and he heard 2 students saying something about the FBI and FBI agents. So my father started talking to them. These were the students that worked behind the desk. And he said, what are you talking about? And the students said, well, last week, 2 FBI agents came here and flashed their badges and insisted on looking at the library records to see what students were checking out of the library. My father was like, what are you talking about? They can't do that. So my father started to poke around, called the FBI, and it turns out this was part of a national program called the Library Awareness Program, where FBI agents were going into colleges and university libraries and demanding to see what students were checking out of the library. And they were, in fact, looking for any students with foreign-sounding names, supposedly to see if they were learning how to make nuclear bombs or make chemical weapons. Well, my father was like, this is all public information. This is a library. This is not classified information. In America, you can read whatever you want. So my father contacted the Maryland State Legislature and started working with the lawmakers and managed to get legislation passed in Maryland that made all library records private. And if you wanted to search them, if the FBI or police came, you'd have to get a court order to go through the records. My father then worked with Congress and testified on Capitol Hill to actually get national legislation passed that made all library records private. My father said, we don't want our own personal reading materials to be monitored. You should have ability to read whatever you want. And again, nationally, then legislation was passed that said if you want to search library records, you need a court order for doing that. Well, all of this started to get my dad a little celebrity, and ultimately a publishing company reached out to him and asked him to write a book about this. And that led to my father actually publishing more than a dozen books about freedom of information, censorship, and government control of information. And I'm obviously incredibly proud of my father and what he's accomplished. This is a man who never thought he would be a librarian and ended up really making an impact in keeping Americans' privacy private. And I have to say, along with being very proud of him, his ability to stumble into careers or find new passions and new paths in life, I think has really rubbed off on me. When I was in college, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I started off as a physics major. And at the end of my 3rd year of physics, I realized I hated it and did not want to do it for my life. So I quickly looked through the college catalog to see what degree could I get, what could I change to in my senior year and still graduate on time. And that ended up being journalism. And thus, I became a magazine and newspaper reporter in Capitol Hill. And things were going great. It was a wonderful experience. And then September 11th happened. And I was in the Capitol when the planes hit in New York and in the Pentagon. And I saw the Capitol Police evacuating people and people running for their lives. I saw the smoke a couple miles away coming out of the Pentagon. And it made me start thinking about, what do I really care in life? What am I passionate about? And I decided the environment was one of those things I was passionate about. And so less than a year after September 11th, I quit journalism and I joined an environmental nonprofit. And that's where I am today. But, and that was 15 years ago. But I don't think my journey is over. I think there's still a lot of other passions that I have yet to discover, and hopefully more opportunities for me to have an impact on the world around me. And like my dad, who in his career processed quite a few overdue books in his life, I know that unlike books, people don't have a past due date. And it's never too late to discover a new passion or take a new path in life or try to have a positive impact on the world around you. Thanks.